You know the project. You've known it for months. You know what it requires because you've done harder things. You have the track record, the technical capacity, and the resources. So there is no legitimate reason, none whatsoever, that this thing is still sitting where it was in January. And yet, every time you sit down to move it forward somehow, something happens. It's not exactly paralysis, it's more like a very sophisticated redirect. You find something else that needs your attention, um, something that genuinely needs attention. You're not being delusional about this, you're not making stuff up. The website needs updating, the piece of content needs to be cleaner or clearer. That internal system isn't quite right yet. So you address it, you feel productive, and you close the laptop. The project doesn't move. And this is the embarrassing part in all of this, is that you are not afraid of the work. Um, because if you could do this in a locked room where no one would ever need to see the first version, you'd have it done by Friday. The task itself isn't what frightens you, because you have been executing at a high level long enough to know the difference between a real obstacle and the manufactured one. What frightens you and what the nervous system is actually responding to is being seen before you're ready. Not failing, being visible in the process of becoming. That distinction is everything, and it's the one that almost nobody makes correctly. The cultural narrative around this kind of freeze is almost entirely wrong. The standard advice to fail fast, embrace failure, or have a growth mindset is all built on a fundamental diagnostic error. It assumes that the thing you're afraid of is the mistake, the structural failure, the wrong answer. But run a simple test. Think of the last time you were working alone on something, anything, that was complex enough. Something that you were genuinely uncertain about. And you were doing so with no audience, no visibility, no one watching the process. What happened when you hit a wall or got it wrong? You adjusted, you logged the error and iterated further. Your nervous system didn't spike as a result. There was no threat response because there was no exposure. Now think of doing the exact same work, same difficulty, same uncertainty, but this time doing it in front of someone whose opinion matters to you, or that will eventually see the output, or that is waiting for it. That's a whole different experience entirely. And this is not a failure problem, it is a visibility problem. And treating it as the former when it's actually the latter is why every piece of advice about embracing failure sounds like intellectually coherent, but is useless in practice. You don't need to be told that failure is acceptable because you already know this. What you need is an accurate account of what's actually happening when your execution stalls. Because until that diagnosis is right, no protocol can fix anything. So let's build the accurate account of what's going on. What you've built over years, probably decades, is what I would call an architecture of performative competence. And it works like this. At some point early in your trajectory, you learn that being seen as capable was not merely pleasant, it was fundamental. Your professional standing, your relationships, the way that rooms responded to you, all of this was organized and became organized eventually around the signal that you were someone who knew what they were doing. And that signal eventually became identity. Not vanity, but identity. The structural core of how you moved through the world. And identity, once it becomes load bearing, becomes something that the psyche protects with the same urgency that it protects physical survival. This is not a metaphor. The same neural architecture that governs threat detection governs identity threat as well. Your nervous system does not distinguish clearly between I might get this wrong in public and I might be revealed as someone who doesn't belong here. To the autonomic system, they both register as danger. So the psyche builds a hatch, an escape hatch. When the high exposure task comes into view, the launch, the pitch, the first video, if you're a creator, the conversation that could go badly, the brain automatically redirects execution energy towards low exposure and high controllability environments, meaning tasks that you feel sure of doing. You don't consciously decide to do this. It happens below the decision level, the conscious decision level, and it produces work that uh, looks from the outside and feels from the inside exactly like productive activity. This is the mechanism. It's not procrastination. Procrastination looks like avoidance most of the time. This looks like work. You are doing things and they are real and they are valuable. Those things that you do just so happen to be things that carry zero risk of public exposure before you feel ready. I worked with a client. I'll call him Marcus. It's not his real name. If you've heard me talk about past clients before, you know that about half of them are named Marcus for some reason. And Marcus ran a division of a company with several hundred people beneath him, reporting to him. Operationally, he was exceptional and his team was exceptional. They delivered, their metrics were clean. So, by every external measure, this man was functioning at the top of his game. He came to me because he had been sitting on a proposal for 12 months. And this was a proposal that, by his own assessment and his colleagues' assessment as well, was the right move. It was well researched, strategic, and it was overdue. So he had every reason to bring it forward and no legitimate professional reason not to do so. What he'd been doing is, instead of presenting it, was to refine it. 12 months of refinement. The document was, by the time we spoke, immaculate. It was also completely unsubmitted. So when I asked him what would happen if he submitted it and the senior team pushed back, if they questioned his reasoning and do so publicly in a room full of his peers, he paused for a really long time. And then he said, I think I'd be fine with being wrong. What I can't stand is the idea of looking uncertain. So there it is. It's not the failure, it's the visibility of the process, the exposure of the gap between where he was and where he projected himself to be. The proposal wasn't unsubmitted because he doubted it. It was unsubmitted because submitting it would put him in a room where he might have to navigate doubt in front of people whose perception of him was important to him. So the refinement was a hiding place, but it was built out of genuine work. That's the sophistication of the mechanism. It never looks like you're hiding. It always looks like you're having standards. And this is what the mechanism costs, actually costs, and uh, I will state the cost plainly. The gap between where you are and where you've identified you need to go always requires a passage through public exposure before competence is achieved. There's no route around this. Every time you level up, every new market, every new role, new audience, new relationship dynamics, uh, every every type of these transitions have a mandatory unpolished phase. The people who move through them quickly are not the ones who are less afraid of them. They are the ones who have stopped making image preservation to be their primary variable. Because when image presentation is the primary variable, execution serves reputation rather than development. You move only when you can move well. And moving only when you can move well means that you never move into anything genuinely new, because anything genuinely new requires a period of visible incompetence. This is the structural cost. It's not the anxiety or the delay, it's the ceiling, the permanent ceiling imposed by a system that protects the image of competence at the expense of actual development of that competence. Marcus understood this instantly when I named it. So his response was, uh, I have been performing competence instead of building it. And that's the distinction. And it's not a small one by any means. So in order to escape this mechanism, two things need to shift, not as motivational adjustments, but as structural changes in how you measure yourself. The first is this: the polished debut is not the goal, and it never was. The goal is exposure velocity. How quickly can you move through the unpolished versions to get to the version that is actually worth protecting? Every high output creative, every serious builder, every person operating at genuine scale has a body of early work that they would prefer not to show you today. Not because they were incompetent, because their competence is the output of public iteration, not the prerequisite for it. You cannot think your way to the polished version. You can only move through the unpolished ones fast enough that the gap closes before the audience even cares, whatever that audience may be comprised of. The second shift is the identity metric. If you are currently measuring yourself by how capable you appear to the audience, you will always optimize for that appearance. The metric that actually produces development is different. It's how quickly can you be seen while uncertain without your internal architecture collapsing. That is the real competence, not the performance of certainty, but the capacity to function while visible and unfinished at the same time. Marcus submitted the proposal 2 weeks after we talked, and it was, of course, questioned in the boardroom. There was pushback from one senior leader, especially, and it happened in exactly the kind of room he'd been avoiding. But he survived it. And he did so not because he performed confidence, but because he stopped needing the room to confirm his identity. The proposal didn't define whether he belonged there, because he already knew that he did. So the project you've been refining, the one that's been exactly where it was in January, is not waiting for you to feel ready. It is waiting for you to stop needing to look ready before you begin. Those are different problems, and only one of them has a solution.